get straight in there. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I understand you guys work together, and my husband and I tried it. And I don't want to say it turned out horribly because it didn't. However, definitely learned our different approaches in, gosh, how do I say this nicely? Our different work ethics. I'll say that, our different work ethics. And I tend to be like, no, let's get it done. It's an emergency. It has to happen now. Where my husband's like, and he has said this and survived saying it, he's more like, your emergencies don't need to be my emergencies. Now I'm gonna be quite honest. I'm gonna be quite honest. He almost didn't survive that one. He almost did not survive that one. And we're about to celebrate 25 years of marriage. So It just didn't work out for us. And so for both of you, how has this journey been?
I mean, I think for me, it's been generally very, very positive. Like if I could go back and do it over again, I absolutely would, but filled with sticky moments, especially at the beginning, because I mean, you're trying to figure out how do you work with someone that you know really, really well. But it's just very, very different. And I think the biggest thing that I have found is when you're working with a spouse, there's nowhere to run. So many times in relationships, people are like, you're having a fight and they're like, oh, I have to go to work or I have to work late. They find ways to avoid the problems in the relationship. And I think that is what is both very difficult and also the magic of working with your spouse is that you have to face all that stuff head on and actually get to a place of real solution, because there's nowhere to escape to.
I don't know if I call it magic, but she's right. There is nowhere to escape. You really do work together and you've got to figure out the problems. You got to figure out the challenge. You have to understand how to overcome the difficulties. So when I first brought Monica on, I had already owned the business and I think I'd been running it for 13 or 14 years. And I realized I have all kinds of weaknesses. I have a strong work ethic. I want to show up and go and make things happen. But I also have ADHD, right? Let's just own that. And so I tend to start a lot more than I tend to finish. And I knew I needed somebody that could come in and help me finish. And she would be a great compliment for me. She's a great compliment in our personal lives. So why wouldn't she be a great compliment in our business lives? So I brought her on to initially do some consulting, maybe help me find someone that could be like her. And pretty quickly, she stepped in and really brought her talents to bear. And it was great in so many ways. You go through that honeymoon phase. I'm going to get all my problems solved. Everything feels good. And then all of a sudden you start finding problems you didn't know were there and new problems, and you have to confront them. And it was pretty quickly where I was like, I don't know, we're 6 months in. Can I fire my wife? How do I go home? I still want to be able to sleep next to her. Yeah, just asking for a friend, right? I was like, how do you make that work? Like, can I fire my wife, but the marriage still holds steady? And I was like, probably not. We've got to work these things through.
Well, and to be clear, it's not that I was performing badly. In fact, I think I was doing really, really well. The issue was that you start moving someone else's cheese and they don't like that. It's really uncomfortable. Yes. And when that business represents your livelihood, your future, like he sunk everything into it that he's got for years, to trust someone else with that. I mean, it's harder than trusting someone to watch your kids. Like, it's so scary. And so when I start moving things all over and some of the employees are like, oh, we don't know about this, like it brings up doubts and questions everywhere. And so I like to kind of compare it to, like, if you go into a closet, like if you go to like a hoarder's closet and you're like, we're going to clean this out, it looks worse before it looks better. You've got to pull everything out of that closet, figure out what belongs, what doesn't belong, organize things, wipe it all down. Like, it is a whole process. And so I think that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning, was like, stick with me. This is where we're going to end up. And he's like, but how do you know? Are you sure? And they were reasonable questions. But for me, I'm like, stick with it, because it's not sustainable where it is. But if we get to this place, we can run and grow the business so much faster if the infrastructure is just working better. Like, it can't grow with where it is. So
I always go back to the Little Rascals metaphor. If you remember, they build this soapbox derby car and it looks like it's just going to fall apart. And their competitor has the rich father who bought him the fancy whatever. And that's what they were really going to race. We're trying to take that beat up soapbox derby car that we had that I had built for 14 years and turned it into an F1 racing car. And we're trying to do it while it's driving down the road. And it was terrifying. And it's terrifying to see my wife start to do all these things that did need to happen, but that I had to give up control for. And it was a lot of heartache and internal soul searching, and then working out what it needed to look like for our relationship to make that happen. It's never easy.
No. Donald, what was it? So your wife is literally tearing apart the car while you're in motion. I love that example. Love that example. So your wife is like, nope, don't need this. And like literally like rebuilding, let's say it. And then you have staff that's also like, who the hell is this chick? First off, like, and also, right, like also probably doesn't trust the process. So you probably also have staff that's like, no, wait a minute, we do need this, and there's probably this little bit of a tug of war. What was it for you? And I say, I focus on you with this question just because the staff was with you for a lot longer than with Monica. So what was it for you that just kind of like had to shift, had to step back? Like, what was it exactly, or what moment was it where you're like, okay, hold on, I have to be willing to accept this change? Like, what was it? What was that like turning moment for you?
Wow, finding the turning moment's hard. I'll go back to the thing that where I was like, I just don't know if this is going to work at all. So it was a staff thing, right? Because the staff are really uncomfortable, and Monica was really trying to bring a culture of accountability that we'd never had. As an ADHD manager, I don't manage at all.
It was the Wild West.
It was, and we had a really critical employee who everything was in her head. We didn't have the processes down. We didn't have the information we would need if she left. And this employee and Monica were butting heads over meaningful cultural issues. And I was like, this employee is going to leave and we are going to be in a world of hurt. We cannot have her leave. And she's like, no one can hold the business hostage. Like, it will never work if somebody can hold your business hostage. I was like, you're so right. That's accurate. That is true. And yet you keep pushing her every button and she's going to walk out tomorrow. Right. I was like, it can't be that way. And so that was the struggle that I watched happen initially. And I think as I saw her gain that employee's trust and her make the right kinds of changes and start to initiate the right kind of process, I felt a great sense of relief. I wish I could say that was the last time we really came to a crossroads. It wasn't at all, right? No. But that was probably the first time once I saw her gain that trust and start to lay things out differently that I was like, oh, okay, this could be better. I need to step back and chill out and trust her process more. But it was so hard because I was so afraid that that employee was going to leave and I was going to have to get in and do all the work I hated to do and have to figure out everything that she'd already solved.
And I think really he had to see that whole cycle of like ideation through the whole implementation and training the staff and getting buy-in from the staff and getting them on board, and then seeing what is that result that follows that. And then when he started to see, oh, we're getting way better results than we had before. We're having way less errors than we had before. The culture is better. People are showing up differently. He had to really see that end result. And it was really like cycles of that over and over again for a period of a couple of years for him to really build that trust. So I think a lot of people like to point to those like dramatic moments of, okay, this was the moment, and those stories are really cool. But I think the reality so often is you build that trust little by little. And he had to kind of see the results for himself. He had to see proof of concept with what I was doing. And so now we've gone through that cycle so many times that even when all of his fears are getting triggered and he's uncertain about things, he can go back to the hundreds of times where he's like, okay, you said it would play out this way, and it did every single time. And so I feel like it's that slow building of trust.
I describe it a little bit differently for me, but yeah, go ahead.
So my first question, which I know all of the audience right now is like holding on for dear life to find out, is that lady still employed with you guys? Did she make the cut?
No. Oh, so she stayed for several years. She did. So we were able to get to a point where she understood what we were trying to do. And it was kind of the same for her. She had to see, okay, the way Monica's doing it is better. Part of the issue was she was very emotionally attached to the kind of the general manager that was her supervisor beforehand. And he was one of the obvious people that had to go because he just was not a fit for what the business needed and was causing a lot of stagnation, was causing cultural issues, and he had to go. And so once he removed, it was almost this like loyalty if she was loyal to him rather than loyal to the business, to us as the owners. And so we had to really get through that cycle of like, who can hop on board with us and who can't, because this is the way it has to be, because it is what the business needs. And so it took her a while to come around, but with her personality, she's very results driven. And so her seeing, okay, things are running better. We're not having the out of stock issues that we used to have. We're sending private label orders on time. We're not running out of labels, just things that were chronic issues that she always would have to clean up. When those went away and she was no longer cleaning up messes, she started to realize, okay, this is better. I don't think I ever became her favorite person because the guy before would just wanted to bring smiles and cheerfulness and zero accountability. And a boss that brings a lot of accountability is never going to be the favorite boss, but it's the boss that drives results. And it's the one that I think in the long term people can really respect if they are also a results oriented person. And so she stayed with us until her retirement. And then when she was ready to retire, she moved on at that point. So now at this point, we've got staff that has only known both of us in the business, but those first days were sticky.
Hard. Monica, you are a badass. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I want to go ahead and ask you a similar question. What was it for you because, obviously you care deeply for your husband and you 1,000% want the business to thrive, and, on Donaldson, I when my husband and I were working together, I'm like, oh my God, dear Lord. And I'm not going to lie, Monica, you and I would be the perfect match. We would be a match made in heaven. You would not get any pushback from me. I'd be like, take the wheel, take it all.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of similarities with the two of us. So for you, because I imagine on your end, there has to be a great amount of patience and a great amount of confidence because, it makes sense why, your husband's having these doubts. It 1,000% makes sense. Let's take your guys' relationship out the window for a minute. As a business, 1,000%, he has people's livelihoods to protect, right? I mean, he's providing income for these families. So yeah, we don't want to mess with that. Totally respect that. And at the same time, there has to be this high level of confidence where you 1,000% believe in what you're starting to bring into the company and the changes you're making. What was it for you? Was it like a light bulb moment? Like, what was it that kept you going? And even though there was, resistance, and I can imagine how beautiful, homegirl was, I know she wasn't putting up without a fight, right? But like, what was, and again, for good reason, they're protecting the business. But for you, what was it that like either kept you going or you just, what helped you through that process?
So it's really interesting to kind of look back on that because I think for me, like one of the gifts that I feel like I have as a person is there's just certain things where I have like this intuition where I know I'm right about something and I have no doubt in my mind about that. So sometimes it's, I can meet a person and I'm like, I know that there's red flags there and I know exactly what those are. Or
girl, we're sisters. I swear we're sisters.
And honestly, I think some of it comes from like being raised by a really emotionally unhealthy mom and all the trauma of my childhood. I feel like I picked up kind of a sixth sense with people and with a lot of things. And so I think when you combine that with my personality type, I have this ability to predict and forecast the future very, very accurately. And so I can look at a situation and say, if we do this, it will play out this way. If we do this other thing, it will play out this other way. And it's incredibly accurate. And I feel like often people don't believe it because they're like, no one has that ability. But I'm like, I promise you it's there. And I don't know how to explain why it's there. But yeah, I'm like, watch me. And it happens. And all the time, like people on our team were like, how did you know this? How did you know that? And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you how. I just know that it is, and it's there, and it's built into me, and it's been there for basically my whole life. And so I think that is part of what's really cool, is when you can pair a career and pair exactly what your role is with your natural gifts, you thrive. And that works for everybody. And we do that across our team. But for me, that was really the thing that guided me the whole time, is there were things that I just knew and understood intuitively about the business and the direction it needed to go and what changes were going to get us closer to that goal, where I had no doubt in my mind. I was absolutely certain of that. And so I think that's really what it came down to, is I'm like, okay, I want the best for you, Donald. I want you to hit all of your career goals. And I'd watched him for years be frustrated with the business. It wasn't growing as fast as he wanted. The employees weren't performing the way he wanted. He was getting frustrated and like, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to sell the business and do something else? And so as a wife, I want him to reach his highest potential in his career. I want him to build the business empire of his dreams, but I'm seeing the places where he's hitting a wall over and over and over again. And I intuitively know if I make these changes, that wall is going to go away and it's going to stop. And then in addition to that, this business supports our family. It's our whole future. Like our eggs are in one basket. And so that's the other part that's really critical, is it's like, we want to have a really secure future for our family. And so that's the other piece that comes in. And I'm like, okay, if these are the goals we have for our family, this is what I know we need to do to hit that. And so I just feel like it's that internal thing that I don't even know how to name that guides all of my decisions. And it's not there with every question that pops up. There's a lot of things where we're like, oh, we don't know, and we have to weigh the options and figure it out. But it pops up when it pops up. And when it's there, anytime I double down on that, it's never been wrong.
Yeah. 1,000% intuitive sense. 1,000%. And that confidence, believing in it, believing in it wholeheartady. So this right here has helped your business, your guys' relationship, how you guys are able to work, together, how you both respect one another, how you both care for one another. And again, that level of patience, right? And that level of confidence. Donald, I'm going to go ahead and get into my main question, but is like all of these moves that happen, did in any way this change like how you viewed Monica? Like, holy shit, she is sexy as hell. Like even right now with her talking, like
I think once I got through my own fears, uncertainties, and doubts about what she was doing, and I embraced it as valuable. Oh yeah, absolutely. You're like, wow, I really married high value, way above what I understood I was marrying into, right? But it took embracing the reality of what she was creating and being like, no, this is better. Oh, this is, wow, yeah. I knew she was brilliant. I knew she was gifted mentally. I found that exciting, but I wanted her to like stay at home and be calm with her mental brain, and all that strength and power that she had. I was like, yeah, just leave it home and bring me lots of good cookies and smiles and it was all bogus, right? Because
what about me says like, stay at home and make cookies all
none
day.
of it, girl.
It's
none of it. None of it.
And I knew that, but at the same time, I was like, yeah, but I don't really want you in this, but I'm desperate for help, and you're clearly the person to help. And now I adore her. I told her, I think last week we were having a conversation. I was like, hey, some days I think maybe you should just run the business and I should retire. Like I should step out and do something different, because she's just that capable of everything that needs to happen.
But I think part of what's really cool is it's like the places where I feel weak, Donald is super, super strong. And the places where he's like, I hate that. Like he hates to manage people. He hates to worry about like just any of the like leadership management, holding people accountable, having the hard conversations. He wants to be able to go work on actually growing the business. And so I think that's part of what has been so awesome is like, there's places where like I get nervous with the financials. I get really nervous to take a risk. It's hard for me to know, like, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? I know what the business needs, but like when it comes to the money, I'm unsure. And Donald's incredibly gifted with that. And so I think that is part of where I'm like, no, we have to do it as a duo. Because it's like, one of us could limp along, but together it's way more powerful.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and go there. Let's talk about Epic Dental. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I started it 21 years ago as a way to help people who struggled with cavities find a solution that got to the root cause. We sell primarily gum, mints, toothpaste, and mouthwash. Essentially, they're all sweetened with xylitol. Xylitol is a natural sweetener that interferes with the metabolic process of the Streptococcus mutans bacteria. They're a particularly nasty strain of bacteria that, if you have in your mouth, can really take over your oral microbiome and dominate it. They produce acid as a byproduct of consuming carbohydrates. So anytime you eat something that's got carbohydrates, if you've got this bacteria, they'll digest that and turn it down into acid. And that acid will dissolve calcium and phosphate bonds in your teeth. So, anyway, I brought the system of the gum, mints, toothpaste, and mouthwash to the US as like, hey, here's a great way to set this up and really change what's happening in your mouth. And we've helped tens of thousands of customers really change their oral microbiome in a significant fashion where they don't struggle with cavities anymore. So that's what we do. And I've just been, figuring out how to grow it on my own for a long time. And it had gotten big enough that it just felt like a hassle to manage on my own. And obviously I had a team of employees that were doing all the work, but that's where I brought Monica in. I was like, we really need to next level this, and to next level it, we can't run the rickety operation we've got now. We've really got to change things and improve them. And she brought a level of professionalism that we'd never had before.
Yeah. What would you say? So in my field, oftentimes I have, we'll have patients who call and tell us, all the things that they want, right? And then once we meet with them, once we do an assessment, we do the intake assessment, we start to figure out what they really need. And, sometimes they match, sometimes they don't, right? One prime example would be, I want to be, let's say for a couple, I want my husband to understand me more. And so you bring them in and you start, you go through the whole entire intake process, and then it turns into, well, I just want you to tell him how he's wrong and I'm right. And it's like, okay, I get that that's what you want. I totally get that. And what you really need, is we need to definitely address some of that trauma. Let's dive into your past, and maybe some of that, childhood dysfunction, right? And so for you guys right now, you're speaking to your audience. What do we need to know that we don't know right now? Like, why do I need to buy your product? Like, I thought going to we have Barron's and Trader Joe's and Sprouts. So as long as I buy their gum, I'm good to go. What do I not know that I need to know?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe you are good to go. If you've never struggled with cavities, you don't need my product at all.
I have. Yes, I have. I floss, I brush, and I still have cavities. I don't understand it. So help me.
Yeah, no, that's the really frustrating thing. So many people brush and floss and still get cavities. And it's because brushing and flossing doesn't treat the oral microbiome really. All it does is scrub off and move around that bacteria. So you're knocking down the biofilm, but you're not changing the biofilm. You really need to change the biofilm. Xylitol helps eliminate the Streptococcus mutans. And if you're consistently getting cavities, you have an S. mutans infection. And brushing and flossing doesn't solve it. I like to say you don't bring a toothbrush to an acid fight, because what you're really getting when you get cavities is acid. And that acid is either coming from the things you choose to eat and drink, and that causes acid erosion and promotes dysbiosis, is what they call it in the oral microbiome, where you get the bad bacteria thriving and the good bacteria declining. So the acid can really have a challenge there. And as your teeth erode and the calcium and phosphate come out, it just creates even more footholds for the bad bacteria to get in there. So you really need to eliminate the bad bacteria. So what we recommend is 2 pieces of gum after each meal, snack, soda. If you do that at least 3 times a day, you buffer against the acid that was a part of whatever you consume, and your saliva will start to redeposit minerals, and then the xylitol will go and work with that bad bacteria. They'll try and consume it. They can't break it down and turn it into acid, and they'll use that as their preferential food source while it's there, and they'll start to die off. And you'll see a decline in the S. mutans. And in general, your teeth will start to feel slippery smooth. You'll start to be like, oh my gosh, it's almost like I just went to the dentist. So for people that have struggled consistently with cavities, it's a great solution. If you really don't ever have cavities, chew whatever gum you want. This is really designed for people that are struggling. Like, I brush and floss, and I don't know, I show up at the dentist and there's a good chance I have to come back for a filling.
And
Yeah.
I think the big thing that people don't know is they don't understand where cavities come from. They get told their whole life, brush your teeth. When you go to the dentist, they shame you about how much you're flossing or not flossing.
Yes,
And,
it's so
and
frustrating.
it doesn't solve the problem when you feel terrible and it's bill after bill. And so if people really understood what causes cavities and how you get out of that cycle, they could completely change their oral health story from that point on. So when they understand, it all comes down to acid. It's acid from the foods and drinks you're consuming that are tearing apart your teeth, or it's acid from the bacteria if you have these bad strains of bacteria. And so if you can figure out how to change your mouth so that you don't have an acidic environment, but you have a neutral or better environment, your cavity problem goes away. And so dentists understand this science incredibly well, but they don't always have time to stop and educate their patients. And so you'll ask a dentist, what am I doing wrong? And they have 30 seconds to be like, oh, I don't know, try and floss more. And so people don't always get the information they need. And so that's a lot of what we're out here trying to do, is to have educational content on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube Shorts, to have people understand the real cause of cavities that their dentist understands, but it never makes it out to the mass population. And it's such a disservice. And so if you can figure out the right information and have the right tools, it's so easy to stop the cavity cycle.
Gotcha. What questions? So I have had, I've gone to, it was crazy. I went to one dentist and they told me I had so many cavities, and I went to another dentist and they told me I didn't have any. One of them, that was so much fun. That was so much fun.
Studies on that, actually.
Girl, oh my God. So we ended up, we have really, really good dental insurance. And so for a long time, my kids were going to this one dentist and they were fine. Everything was good. We ended up moving. And then we went to another dentist, and all of us went. And all of a sudden, I'm like dishing out, like, I'm not lying. I'm like coming with like money, like nonstop with money. And I'm like, do we really all have this many like all of us? I have 3 girls, and my husband's like, this just doesn't make sense. And so I ended up calling my last doctor, and it's like, okay, we're pretty good when it comes to our checkups and our cleanings. We'll go twice a year. This one's over here telling me I need a deep cleaning. And then my, 7-year-old needs a deep cleaning. And it's like, she does really? Okay. And I end up calling my last dentist. I'm like, were we just really that bad? Were you that bad? Like, you can tell me now because I'm no longer with you. Like, what is going on? And she's like, get the hell out of there. And I'm like, really? And we already spent, I wish I was lying, but it was already like probably, $3,000 to $5,000 that we had already spent. I wish I was lying. And it was just like, we ended up going to one of our neighbors. They own a dental practice. We ended up going there and they're like, you're fine. And it's like, shit.
Right?
You hit a dishonest dentist, like straight up. Like I heard your story about that change and my heart sunk, because I got to tell you a couple of things. Once you drill a tooth, it is never the same. You're going to have more work on that tooth, period, in the future, right? Like it's so wrong. There was a study they did. Now, this was in Europe. So they did this in Switzerland. They took a guy, 4 different dentists evaluated him, no cavities, right? Then they sent him around to go get checkups and exams. How many dentists do you think out of the 100 that they saw, I don't know if it was really 100, but out of 100%, diagnosed him with cavities?
Shit, probably like 95, 80.
No, 35%. 35% of the dentists told him.
My experience would have been 95.
No, so 35% of the dentists said you had cavities. So you've got to, if that carries over to the US, you have a 1 in 3 chance of showing up in a dental office where somebody's going to tell you have a cavity when in fact you don't. And that pains my soul, because there are so many great dentists out there that just want to do right by you. Just like the one you called back up and she's like, get out of there. Like, she's clearly a good dentist. But I went to a dentist, my sister-in-law was a dental hygienist. She just graduated hygiene school. I was like, I want to support you. I'll come over to your new practice and I'll get my teeth cleaned there. And I did. And that dentist walked in and said, you had 4 cavities. And I was like, dude, I sell cavity prevention. I didn't say anything to him. He didn't know what I did. But I was like, I don't. So I went back to my old dentist. I was like, take a look. He says they're in these teeth. We pull out the x-rays. We look, and there's nothing there. Now, this is the dentist who goes on to buy 5 practices. He wins a Ferrari for a marketing competition. You know, he's all about himself, clearly. And that's all he was operating from, was how do I get more money out of the patient base? And I hate when I see that. It pains my soul, because there are so many dentists that want to do right by you, and you need to make sure you find one. So if you ever have a change like that in your health, go back to your old dentist and ask the question like you did. Get a second opinion. Go to somebody else. But don't trust that one you just went into that's giving you a totally different bill of health, because that's inconsistent with what happens.
And to me, a green flag of a really good dentist is if you ask a question, like if they say you have a cavity and you're asking the question of, how do I get out of this cavity cycle? What should I be doing differently? If that is a dental hygienist or a dentist that will answer that question and give you real solutions and spend that time, that is a huge green flag. And the reason why is because they don't get billed for education. That is why you get almost no education at a lot of dental offices, because that is time they could be spending drilling someone else's tooth. And there's no shortage of people with cavities. So if they will take that time and stop and talk to you and say, well, here's what I'm seeing that are your risk factors. Let's go through this assessment and tell, I'll break down what I'm seeing, what you could be doing differently. Here's some products and tools that you could be using. Here's how you could be brushing differently. If they will have a conversation with you for 5 minutes with some specifics about your oral health, that's huge, because so many of them will just kind of give you a flippant answer, move on to the next pod and keep working. And so that is a great way to kind of test that out. And the other thing you can ask is, if they say you have a cavity, you can say, okay, is this like a true cavity? Is it just a baby cavity? Is it starting? They'll use these different phrases to kind of talk about a small cavity or a baby cavity. And what they're really talking about is one that has not gone through the enamel into the dentin layer. And so for a lot of those, you can remineralize if you're doing the right kind of strategy, or you can just give it some time to see if you can get it to kind of pause its progression. There's a lot of different levers you can pull. So a dentist that will have a real conversation about, is it essential to drill now? Can we kind of watch it for a minute and see if it's aggressive enough that it's getting worse? Can you change your habits enough to kind of pause its progression? Someone that will engage in any of those conversations, like that's someone that actually has your best interest at heart and not just their wallet.
Yeah. Love that. Love. If you can advise all of us to do, and I wrote this, ladies, if you didn't write this down, I got you. I love, Monica, you said, how do I get out of this cavity cycle? Like that, that's my dentist is going to say hello. And the first thing I'm going to say is, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this cavity cycle? I think I'm fine now. I think I'm in the clear now. But what is one thing you all want us to take from this episode? Like one bit of education or one question we should ask, or one thing we should do right now?
I mean, I think the biggest thing you can do, if you're someone that's had a cavity before, or your kids have cavities, or you're even just worried about it, xylitol is incredibly effective for your mouth. It's just magical. And it's because it does 2 things. It kills the cavity causing bacteria because they can't metabolize the xylitol, but they prefer it over other food sources. And so they end up dying off. The healthy bacteria thrive. But the other thing it does is the sweetness in it gets your saliva flowing. And your saliva is amazing because it can wash those minerals kind of over your teeth. They can redeposit. And so your teeth are always kind of breaking apart and building back up depending on what your pH is looking like in your mouth. And so if you can pay attention to the pH, and so if you're having something like sour candies, or if you're having soda, or you're having coffee, or you're having, a salad dressing, anything that is acidic, if you rinse your mouth thoroughly with water after, try not to graze or sip on it all day long. Try and kind of keep it to meal times. Rinse with water and then follow with xylitol gum. It doesn't even have to be our brand if you want to try something else. But if you have xylitol gum or mints after, that's going to be a huge, huge game changer. And part of how you can tell it's working is your teeth feel different. We get comments and reviews all the time of people talking about how smooth their teeth feel. It feels like they just left a dental cleaning. And the reason why is those bacteria that make that plaque film, those fuzzy sweaters all over your teeth, you're getting rid of those. You're killing those off. And so when your teeth kind of have that gritty feeling, or they feel yucky towards the end of the day, that is a sign that you have that bacterial problem. But when you are chewing the gum in enough of a quantity, because you want to make sure you're hitting a minimum of 6 grams a day, if you're doing that consistently, your teeth are going to feel so smooth, like you just came from a cleaning. And so that's how you know you're doing it right.
Oh, I'm like literally going through my teeth right now, and I'm like, oh, there's the sweater. Damn it.
Right? Right. Right. The sweaters are the red flag you have to look for.
Right. Donald, same question. So for us that like, our Pellegrinos, our sparkling waters, our kids to, Monica, you bring a good point with the, my kids love Sour Patch candies. Like love the chewy ones, the ones that stay on your teeth forever and cause those beautiful cavities are part of the reason. So what advice would you give us, Donald, as well? So for us moms, what Monica just gave us a whole lot, and I hope you guys wrote that down. Donald, what can you give us?
More than restricting those things, just limit the frequency. So when you have an experience with a sour candy or something acidic that can dissolve calcium and phosphate bonds, your teeth the saliva naturally want to redeposit minerals on the teeth, but it takes about 30 minutes for it to stabilize the acid. So if you eat one now and eat one 5 minutes later and 5 minutes later, now you've got the initial period of 15 minutes, where you're separating the first by 5 and 5, and then you add the 30 minutes there, and you're like, I've got 45 minutes before I get back. So when you sip on a water or soda all day, you're leaving yourself down below that remineralization line. But if you do it at meal times, you're pretty good. In 30 minutes, you're going to restabilize. When it's the sticky candies, it takes a little bit longer to wash that out or to do something. But I would say that's the easiest thing to do, is just limit the frequency. Do your acidic things at meal times, and then chase it with rinse with water, chew xylitol gum, and you'll be golden.
Well, and another thing moms need to understand is sugar does not cause cavities. That is an absolute lie. It's a myth.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And so many people think that, or they're like, moms worry at Halloween time, or they worry about like what they're, feeding their kids. It is never, ever the sugar causing cavities. It is always the acid. And so what happens is those sugars can feed the bad bacteria, but so can broccoli, so can salad dressing, so can so many other things. And so if there's any kind of fermentable carbohydrates, those bacteria can, go eat that and produce acid as a waste that's tearing down your teeth. And so that's why people are like, oh, avoid sugar, because they're trying to say avoid feeding the bacteria. But you're going to have to eat at some point, and chances are you're going to have, some kind of carbs throughout your day. And so that's the bacteria are eating anyway. But when you bring xylitol into the equation and they have the chance to eat that, they will always pick xylitol over any other sugars, any other food source, because they like it that much. And that is shown in the scientific literature. That's not just our opinion. They have demonstrated that in the lab, that they prefer xylitol. And so they eat it, but they can't digest it. And so I think so many moms feel all this guilt and all this stress about like, oh no, I'm letting my kids have sugar. Yeah. Should I be restricting it more? And, there's other health consequences of eating too much sugar for sure. But I think as far as cavities go, like that is not the source of the problem. And so I think that's part of our responsibility as parents, is to make sure our kids are not being poisoned with myths about their own health, because there's so much bad information out there. But if you teach your kids, hey, this is where the problem is happening in your mouth that's going to cause a cavity, you're setting them up for success long term, because they're going to understand that and make decisions based off of that. So they need to have real information that's taught to them by their parents, because they're not going to hear that at school. No. They might not even hear it at the dental offices if the dentist is busy that day. So
love this. Okay, so where do we buy this? It's sold. Where do I buy it?
You can get it at Amazon. That's where a lot of people like to shop. And so it's just easy. Epic Gum. You look for it there. You can get it at a lot of natural products retailers, like Natural Grocers, for example. Would be a great source to go get the xylitol gum. You can get it on our website, epicdental.com. But really anywhere they sell natural products is a great place to pick it up.
Awesome. So prior to us recording, we talked about giving the audience a 15% discount. Let's talk about it. What are we getting?
Yeah, for sure. You can get 15% off any of the products. Just use Empowered15 and you'll get that discount applied for whatever you choose to order.
Yep. And that's at epicdental.com is where you can use that.
You're on top of it, Monica. I was just going to ask you, where do we find this? How can we follow you on social media? How can we follow? Maybe do you guys have a newsletter with more information?
Yeah, for sure. You can sign up on the website to get more information. Newsletters just down on the bottom. You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram. So epic.dental for both of those handles if you want to hear about the cavity prevention stuff. If you want to see a little bit more about life with us, it's Bailey's.official.
Yep, it's the Bailey's.official. Yep. On both.
Awesome.
And that's where we share more about parenting and working together and
being an entrepreneur, all of that stuff. So
I love that. I love you guys as a couple. It's so good to see such a great success story. Ladies, it can happen. It can 1,000% happen. Thank you guys so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.